A very good morning, our dear viewers. Once again, a very warm welcome to Dekho Apna Desh webinar of the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India. As you're aware, the Ministry of Tourism organizes Dekho Apna Desh webinar sessions under various interesting schemes and topics every Saturday. Celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Ministry of Tourism and the Association of Indian Universities bring to you the 11th episode, Women Freedom Fighters of India. What an interesting subject. Out of the 12 episode webinar series. Today's session, we will be highlighting the contribution of 4 important women of India whose contribution towards India's independence is beyond imagination and unforgettable. They are Rani Velu Nachiyar, Kittur Rani Chennamma, Captain Lakshmi Sahgal, and Gaidinliu. 4 women freedom fighters across India who fought for resistance to the foreign dominance. Now, who is going to talk to us about this subject today? The speaker of the day is Shri V. Hari Sarvanan. Mr. Sarvanan is a cultural anthropologist, ethnographer, and a regional level guide. He has traveled the length and breadth of the country, documenting oral epics and folk paintings practiced among rural Adivasis and pastoral communities. He has also published 2 books, first in Tamil, which he co-authored, Anubhavakalin Nihal Padai, and first part of 3-part series of his research in English titled Gods, Heroes and Their Storytellers, the Intangible Cultural Heritage of India. Friends, let me tell you, while we were talking to him just a few minutes ago, he has wealth of information on this subject. He has done a lot of research from south to north, from east to west, and he has a lot of stories to tell us about this. So my dear friends, let's now go to Mr. Sarvanan to listen to him on this very interesting and encouraging subject as part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat box, and Mr. Sarvanan will be very happy to answer them at the end of the session. So I hand over the screen to Mr. Sarvanan to take it forward.
Good morning. Namaskar. I will welcome all the participants and moderators of this session, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you about 4 women freedom fighters of India who are lesser known. And coincidentally, this is happening on this day, that is June 18th, the day of martyrdom of Rani Lakshmi Bai, Rani of Jhansi, Manikarnika Rani of Jhansi. It has been a martyrdom day today. So it's a sheer coincidence, and I don't suppose we had planned for this on this day. It fell on a Saturday as usual, so we have done it. And to begin with, I would like to pay my respects to Rani of Jhansi for a courageous spirit which led as motivating factors for women even today. It was a motivating factor for Netaji when he created the Indian National Army, and even for women today when they resist so many resistance from society, from institutions and so on. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin this time. There will be my slides. I would like to inform you my slides are limited because the visual material connected with this subject is limited. So I've tried to gather whatever is possible and I'm sharing it with you. And also I'll be referring notes because I don't want to miss out the dates and certain information. So I got my notes with me, so I'll be sharing it with you. To begin with, I would like to inform you that the first woman to be martyred in the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857, before Rani Lakshmi Bai, about 3 months before her, was one minute.
Avanti Bai.
Avantibai Lodi from Dindori, Madhya Pradesh. She was a person who massed about 4,000 mutineers and resisted the British. And we had to remember her. She is lesser known in the 1857 mutiny, the first war of independence, we can call it. It was literally a unified war of independence in Indian history. And to begin with, also, I would like to inform you about a lady who comes much before Avantika Bai and even Rani of Jhansi, that is Abbaka Chauta. It was in the 16th century. She was a queen, Tuluva queen of Ulal. Ulal is a port town in Karnataka, and she resisted the Portuguese navy. So she is one of the persons with whom we don't know much except for a statue in Karnataka in Ulal. Not much is known, so I wanted to inform you about that. So let us begin with our presentation for the day. See, I'll be talking about 4 women freedom fighters, a lot of women freedom fighters, but these 4, why? Is because, not just because they made a mark as being a woman freedom fighter, but also the impact they have had on the society till today. To begin with, I will be starting with Veera Mangai Rani Velu Nachiyar. Velu Nachiyar, she is from the 18th century towards mid and the late 18th century. She hails from a royal family of the Setupathis from Ramanathapuram, that is Ramanad, which is the same place where you got the Rameshwaram, one of the 12 Jyotirlingas of Lord Shiva, and also Rameshwaram, the sacred island town over here. And she is married to the king of Sivaganga. Sivaganga is a small principality which was newly created in the early 1700s, and she was married to the second king. And this and she was a person, Velu Nachiyar was a person, since she came from a royal family, she was trained in martial arts, horse riding, and she was also well versed in languages. For instance, she could converse fluently in Urdu and in French. Now, this was a big achievement for a woman in that age and time. So, she is from Sivaganga. This is the Sivaganga Palace. If you notice, it's still there in Sivaganga. Sivaganga is a town which is located about roughly 48 kilometers south of Madurai, southeast of Madurai. And before all this began, what happens is, it was in Velu Nachiyar, she gets married and she gets settled in Sivaganga estate. And this happens about 78 years before Rani of Jhansi. What happens is, there are 2 incidences which really, there is one incident which shook the people of this region, that is Madurai and the down south region of Tamil Nadu, that is, here, this region, it really had an impact, is the Vellaloor massacre, which happened in 1767, when the community called the Piramalai Kallars refused to pay taxes to the British. What the British did, they did not request them again, they did not send a warning, nothing. They surrounded a village of Piramalai Kallars in Vellaloor and burnt them alive, men, women, and children without mercy. Now, this incident had sent shockwaves among the petty chieftains across Tamil Nadu. They were known as Palayakarar. Palayakarar were the petty chieftains who were ruling small principalities, and among them was the Sivagangai Palayam, which was led by Raja Muthu Vaduganatha Devar, who was the husband of Rani Velu Nachiyar. And again, now coming back to Rani Velu Nachiyar, what happened was, the Sivagangai estate was in the eyes of the British because the whole thing was about taxation. You have to pay a tribute to the British. Now, this is something which not everybody accepted it. Some of them accepted it because they could be in good favor of the British, and others, most of them, they did not accept. And it was in 1772, on 25th of June, when Raja Muthu Vaduganatha Devar had sensed that the British might try to make an armed insertion into the Sivaganga principality, he moved with his retinue, with his small army to Kalayar Koil. Kalayar Koil is an important pilgrimage town in down south. It is an important temple for Lord Shiva. And it is over here he was moving in. And the British learned about it and went, massacred the whole population in the temple town, literally the whole population, the king, his advisors, and his first wife. Velu Nachiyar, being the second wife and with a newborn child, Vellachi Nachiyar, was not with part of the retinue. She was elsewhere in Sivaganga, not in Sivaganga town, but in the district. And after this massacre, the British, led by Colonel Joseph Smith and the son of the Nawab of Orkot from North Tamil Nadu, had looted about 50,000 measures of gold from the temple and left. Now, this one had really shook further from the Velalur incident, and it had spread like wildfire about this. And what happened is Velu Nachiyar shrewdly was whisked away into the forest towards Dindigul, which is in central Tamil Nadu, a little further further north from Sivaganga, and by the Marudu brothers. I'll come back to them because they are also connected with Velu Nachiyar. And she had, at that time, Dindigul came under one Palaikarar called Gopala Nayakar. Now, Gopala Nayakar also was in alliance with Hyder Ali. She got an audience with Hyder Ali. She met Hyder Ali, Velu Nachiyar, and Hyder Ali was so impressed with her, not just because she could talk fluent Urdu, but her perseverance and determination to take back troops to get back Sivaganga from the hands of the Nawab of Arcot and the British, who are now having Sivaganga under them. It took her 8 years. It took her 8 years after the 1772 Kalayar Koil massacre, when her husband was killed. It took her 8 years to gather the armed forces, the revenue, which Hyder Ali had given a reasonable sum to help her in her finances. And on 1780, on the Vijayadashami day, she makes a charge to Sivagangai. And it is also during this time that here is one of the stamps released on a commemoration by the Department of Posts, Government of India in 2008 of Velu Nachiyar. What happened after that is, when in 1780, when she raided the Sivaganga fort, as such, please don't imagine the fort like the Rajasthan forts you have. It is a mud fort. Of course, it does not stand except the palace. Now, this fort was now under the British, and she had two options: is to either directly charge with the troops and face a heavy loss, or to find any other means. At that time, one of her adopted daughters, known as Queel, offered an idea saying that, see, today being Vijayadashami Day, there will be women worshipping the goddess inside the fort. So let me join the women and I'll think about what I can do over there to disrupt the British. And what Queel did was one of the first instances of in history of suicide bomber. What she did is she joined a group of pilgrims going into the fort. She doused herself with ghee and oil, and she lit herself and ran towards the ammunition dump inside the fort, thereby destroying the whole ammunition which was for the British and the Nawab of Arcot. Now, this was a very decisive move, which was literally was a one-stroke victory for the Sivaganga forces. And finally, she was martyred, of course. And finally, Rani Velu Nachiyar raided the fort along with the Marudu brothers, and she ruled up to 1790 Sivaganga estate, whereby she gave the administrative responsibilities to the Marudu brothers. They are two brothers. They are the elder Marudu brother and the younger Marudu brother. And each of them, they took up administration, civil administration and military administration among themselves. And her daughter was also the queen between 1790 to 93. And it was during this time that the Marudu brothers had risen. And she passed away at the age of 1796 at the year 1796 at the age of 66 due to cardiac arrest. Before that, she had visited France to take treatment under the advice of one of the French missionaries working in the area, who was also her tutor in French. And now let us come to Marudu brothers. See, now here is a portrait of the first suicide bomber in history, Kuyil in the center, and the Marudu brothers. And these Marudu brothers were the retainers in the Sivaganga army from childhood. And these were very trusted confidants of the Sivaganga king and Velu Nachiyar. They formed the people's resistance when Velu Nachiyar was not in Sivagangai for about 8 years. And they were skilled in art form called Valari. Valari is a martial art form using the boomerang. And this is a boomerang which was banned by the British after the suppressing of the Marudu brothers. And the Marudu brothers continued their resistance to the British. And they also had done a very important thing is unified all the Palaikaras. Palaikara war is known as in history books, it's known as a Carnatic war, or you can even call it as a Poligar rebellion. That's what the British record called. It was spread across Tamil Nadu. It went on till about 1801, when the British got really agitated by the Marudu brothers when they had done something which was the first of its kind in India, that is the Jambu Thivu Prakadanam. Jambu Thivu Prakadanam means the Jambu Island Proclamation, which is also known as a Tiruchi Proclamation. What the Marudu brother, especially the younger Marudu brother, did is he pasted 2 notices in the wall of Tiruchi Fort and Srirangam Temple, which was calling for unity among all Indians, irrespective of their caste and creed and economic background, and calling all able men to join the forces, and requested them to make sure that not one European is left in India. Only then we can survive, because after the advent of the British East India Company, there are a series of famines, and he mentions in that declaration that we have been reduced into stray dogs who are now looking for food wherever possible, and today water has become food for us. So let us unite together. I call upon all able-bodied men to join us and make sure we vanquish the Europeans from the country. And he also made another statement ending it, saying that anyone who abides with the British, let it be a sepoy or any official, or it could be even a person who's getting a monetary benefit from the British, they will not get moksha after their demise. And joining with the British is incurring the 5, is equivalent to incurring the 5 major sins in Hindu Dharma, which is known in Tamil as Panchamaga Pavangal. And finally, this is the declaration which really aggravated the British and made sure they started to hunt the Marudu brothers. And finally, they were captured on October 24th in 1801. During the capture, people with the Marudu brothers, men, women, and children, around 3,000 of them were brutally executed. The Marudu brothers were hanged in Tirupattur, a town near Madurai, and their heads were severed and placed in Kalayar Koil, so that the people know. And it gives the main idea of the heads placed in Kalayar Koil was to make sure that they were is to terrorize the local population to make sure that there is no oppressing. And the British literally succeeded in that. They terrorized the local population that till 1920s, there was no extremist movement in Tamil Nadu, literally. And today, Marudu brothers are celebrated as people do ancestor worship, not just their caste, but there are so many people who go to Kalayar Koil, where you have the sculptures of Marudu brothers, and they worship them yearly. Here is a statue of the Marudu brothers in Madurai city, near the Teppakulam, one of the important junctions. Every year on October 24th, when their Jayanti is celebrated, women bring milk and pour as they perform Abhisheka on the Marudu brothers. Now, they are very much respected in South Tamil Nadu. And here is a photo of Kalayar Koil. You see the bigger Rajagopuram, the entrance tower of the temple was built by the Marudu brothers on their contribution. They had offered gold, land, and even physical service to the temple while it was being constructed, or rather renovated. And here is, a minute, I'm sorry, Now here you could see the sculptures of the Marudu brothers in Kalayar Koil. So next time you come down south to Madurai, please do visit to Sivaganga. Visit the Sivaganga Palace. You could see the place where Rani Velu Nachiyar had lived and had a campaign against the British. And do visit Kalayar Koil to see the statue of Marudu brothers. And the Indian government had issued a stamp for honoring the Marudu Pandya brothers in 2004. So this is about Velu Nachiyar of Veeramangaya Velu Nachiyar of Tamil Nadu. Next, ladies and gentlemen, we will move to Karnataka. In Karnataka, the next women freedom fighter we would like to see is Kittur Rani Chennamma. Kittur is name of the principality. Kittur is a small principality which was founded in 1585 by the I'm not able to recollect the kingdom. Yeah, sorry. And Rani Chennamma was the queen, the second wife of the Kittur king Malla Raja. And here is the location of Kittur, which is bordering Maharashtra. It is in the district of Belgaum, which is known as Belgavi now. And the Mallasi Raja he had two wives. The first wife Rudramma, and the second wife is Kittur Chennamma. Kittur Chennamma, actually, he took her as a wife because he was impressed with her when he coincidentally saw her slaying a man-eating tiger in the forest during one of his visits to meet her father. He did not know about her, but he went to meet his father to amass forces against the British because he was worried that the infighting between the Marathas and the Mysore armies led by Tipu was the would give an opportunity for the British to grow in South India. And he was true. So that time he wanted to gather the forces of the Desais in North Karnataka and in Maharashtra so that they can form a formidable force which they could resist the British. But unfortunately, things took another turn. That is, in 1824, King Mallas Raja had died without an issue. Sorry, he had an issue, but unfortunately, few months after that, his issue also, one of the last sons, that is Chennamma, the son born from him, and Rani Chennamma had also died due to disease. Few months after the death of the father, and the first wife's sons, Rani Rudrama Devi's sons also had passed away. It was that time that the British had devised a very conniving policy called the Doctrine of Lapse, which means that any king or a queen who does not have a heir, that is a male heir, they have to give away their kingdom, or they have to become the vassals. They have to come under the British administration. Now, this was something which not everybody accepted because the Indian royalty had the right to choose a heir from their relatives if they don't have their own kin. Now, despite this, what happened was Rani Chennamma writes to Epistone who was a Governor General in Mumbai, but nevertheless he does not agree to this, and he sends message to the political agent in Dharwad, who's John Thackeray. Now, John Thackeray, what happens is he starts to harass Rani Chennamma. First, he barges into the Kittur fort, and then here is Kittur fort for you, the ruins of Kittur fort, you can even visit today. He barges into the Kittur fort, and he wants to seize the treasury, so that he thinks that if the treasury is seized, then they won't have the financial resources to stand up an army. But his idea proves wrong, whereby this was the first round of the conflict between the British and Rani Chennamma, where John Thackeray he tries to bargain, and that time they are vanquished, and the British have suffered heavy losses. And the Kittur forces take 2 British officers as hostage. And also during this raid, John Thackeray is killed by one of the lieutenants of Rani Chennamma. At this time, they also take 2 hostages. This was the first round of the conflict. Now, what happens is, now after John Thackeray is killed, there is another person, Chaplain, who comes in. Chaplain assures Rani Chennamma saying that we shall not wage war, we shall not attack you, provided you hand over the hostages. And Rani Chennamma, believing them, handed over the hostages, but as usual, the British did not keep up the word. They attacked the fort, and this time the fort fell. So this happens in a period between, for about 5 months. It was in somewhere between, if I'm not wrong, somewhere between April, May to October 1824 it happens. On October 1824, the Kittur fort falls. Some of the Rani Chennamma advises many of the trusted lieutenants, the Sardars, chieftains, to leave to escape Kittur fort so that they can continue the resistance. And they did so. And she asks daughter-in-laws, 2 of the daughter-in-laws, to take another passage where they get captured by the British. And Rani Chennamma is arrested. And she along with his 2 daughter-in-laws, Janaki Bai and Veerabba, are, the date is December the 2nd, 1824, when Kittur falls, right? And the 3 ladies are taken as political prisoners, and they are jailed in Bayongala Fort, which is nearer to Kittur. And the British, being a political prisoners, the British offer them, the 3 ladies, 40,000 rupees as a yearly pension. And they are still political prisoners. Among the trusted lieutenants of Rani Chennamma was one Sangoli Rayanna. Sangoli Rayanna was a fearless warrior who had gone and met Rani Chennamma as disguising as a sadhu in the jail in Baihongala fort. And it was that time that he passes on information to her, saying about, informing her about what is going on about the resistance. And she again takes up the issue, and she keeps updated about it. And also that time the adopted son of her, Guru Siddhappa, also continues resistance. And finally, Rani Chennamma breathes her last in 1829, and she is buried in the inside the fort complex of Baihongala Fort. And after that, the Kittur resistance is kept up by Sangoli Rayanna. Finally, Sangoli Rayanna is hanged to death in 1830, 1 year after Rani Chennamma's demise. And he was so brave enough that he smiled when he went to the hangman. He took the noose and put it on his head himself, and he shouted loudly when the British officer asked him, "What is your last wish?" He shouted loudly, saying that, "I would like to be born in Kittur again and to chase you people out." Now, this is the resistance what the Kittur people under the leadership of Rani Chennamma had offered against the British. Honoring Rani Chennamma in 2007, her statue was unveiled in the Parliament complex by the former President of India, Shri Pratibha Patil. And here is this statue of Rani Chennamma in the Parliament complex. And this is a statue of Sangoli Rayanna in Bangalore, in a popular place called Majestic Circle, next to the Majestic bus stand. This is a burial site of Rani Chennamma Devi. Now, this is a very old photograph. They have been renovating it. And you'll be wondering why she was buried, because she was a Lingayat. In Lingayat tradition, they are buried, they are not cremated. So next, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be seeing a person you should be familiar with. If you should be familiar with. I can't say anything more than that, sorry. Padma Vibhushan, Captain Lakshmi Sahgal. Lakshmi Sahgal, she is a person, she was popular, she was forgotten by the Indian public until 2006 when she was nominated as the presidential candidate, who was the opponent to Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Sorry, not 2006, it's a wrong date. And of course she lost, but nevertheless, people got to know who is Captain Lakshmi Sahgal. Captain Lakshmi Sahgal was born as Dr. Lakshmi Swaminathan in Chennai in 1914. She was, her father was a very renowned lawyer. He was a Tamilian from Tamil Nadu. Her mother, Ammugutti Swaminathan, was from Kerala, from a Nachiyar family. And her mother was one of the active participants of the Indian National Congress. And she was a lady when the Quit India movement, quite a few movements came in. Sorry, the Swadeshi movement. Her mother had burnt all their Western clothes and stuff like that, and which was something, it was in a very tender age that Dr. Lakshmi Swaminathan learned about nationalism from her mother. And also Lakshmi Swaminathan is the sister of Mirnalini Sarabai, the famous dancer. Here is a portrait. Here in center is Ammukutti Srinivasan, who was also the Rajya Sabha member, elected to Rajya Sabha in 1952. And here on your right is Dr. Lakshmi Swaminathan. On your left is Mirnalini Sarabai, her younger sister. So Lakshmi Swaminathan, she finishes her medicine from Madras Medical College in 1938. She was fiercely independent. Despite her resistance, she was married to a pilot known PK Rao, and she separated immediately. And she left India and she traveled to Singapore in 1940. And this was a time when she also joined the India Independence League, which was based in Singapore, or rather, which was based outside India. It was also connected with Rash Bihari Bose and Mother Kesava Menon. And this Indian Independence League was literally an organization which was waiting for the right moment to pounce on the British. And the moment came in 1942, when the British army surrendered to the Japanese army in Singapore, when a lot of Indian army personnel led by Captain Mohan Singh were looking for forming an Indian National Army and to go all the way to India and take over liberate the country and give it to the countrymen. It was that time that she joins the Indian League, sorry, and then Netaji arrives in Singapore in 1943. And the Indian Independence League takes a new form where things become very active and people are very enthusiastic that there is something going to happen in the future. And that time, she was also, Dr. Lakshmi Swaminathan was very keen to have a personal meeting with Netaji. She had Netaji and Dr. Lakshmi Swaminathan met for, the meeting lasted for 5 hours. At the end of 5 hours, they chalked out a plan to form an all-women's regiment named after Rani of Jhansi. It was called as Rani of Jhansi Regiment, one of the first all-women's regiment in this side of the planet. Because during the Spanish resistance in World War II, there was a women's resistance unit too. But on this side of the earth, that is towards Asia, on the freedom movement, this was one of the first of its kind. It was formed, the Rani of Jhansi Regiment was formed on 2nd July 1943. Initially, the women who comprised of the Rani Lakshmi Bai regiment were all mostly below 20 years. They were literally children. They were ranging from 13 to 16, 18 years to up to 14 to 20 years. They were all these younger, the women who are lesser than 20 years were educated, and they came from affluent families who are in Singapore and Malaysia and Burma, especially the Indians expatriates over there. And many of them were Tamils, the Tamil people who are migrated over there or who were taken by force by the British to work in plantations in Malaysia and in the mines in Burma. So many of the women joined, and when they joined, they had only one condition by the Indian National Army, that is an undertaking signed. A woman who's below 20, she needed to give a certificate to the Indian National Army if she wanted to join the Rani of Jhansi regiment, which is signed. The certificate should be signed by either her father or her husband. Only then she could be taken. And many women, they joined in, especially after hearing Netaji's speech in the Cathay building, which was known for its famous ending, "Give me blood, I shall give you freedom." This Netaji speech inspired so many people that immediately people started to, especially women, they started to remove their earrings, bangles, gold earrings and bangles, and they started to give off to the INA, Indian National Movement, Indian National Army, for their finances. And there are quite a few women who did that. And also, it was also this particular speech that inspired so many people, even in Burma. During his travels, he had done so many of speeches that people were so mesmerized with the speeches, they were inspired by the freedom movement, because the freedom movement in India was not anyway connected to the expatriates or the Tamils and other Indians living in Singapore, Malaysia, or Burma. Because of course, that time also colonialism was there. They were under the British later, after the British, they were under the Japanese, then again under the British, and so on. So this particular speeches of Netaji had inspired them so much that they started to join en masse. At that time, about 500 women joined the Rani of Jhansi regiment, and here is one of the first photos of the women being given training in bonneting and using the rifle, inspected by Netaji and Dr. Lakshmi Swaminathan. Now, Lakshmi Swaminathan, she transforms into Captain Lakshmi Swaminathan. She was a doctor by profession, of course, yes. She was training women and men of the Indian National Army in field emergency medical attention for the battlefield. And they also formed a 200 women strong Chand Bibi nursing corps, which was part of the Rani of Jhansi regiment, who was serving the wounded in the battle. Now, here is one of the famous photos of Netaji reviewing the Rani of Jhansi regiment along with Captain Lakshmi Sahgal. And Dr. Lakshmi Sahgal retained this name even after the independence. She retained her name as Captain Lakshmi Sahgal. This is a group photo of one of the leaders of the Indian National Army. Now, talking about this, see, they made their march the march to India via Burma and through Northeast India. The famous slogan of Netaji, "Chalo Delhi," to hoist the flag in the Lal Killa, the Red Fort. So they begin the INA's operation begins at around December 1944. But within about a year or two, what happens is they do realize that they are not able, the supply lanes have been blocked for the supply of ammunition. And then there has been a resistance and all. And finally, Netaji informs the Indian National Army to disband and to carry on. Many of them, they disband and they go back to their native homes, but they are arrested. Many of them, they join the Japanese and retreat. And whatever means possible, they try to retreat. And during this time, it was in May 1945, Captain Lakshmi Sahgal was arrested in Burma and kept in house arrest and sent back to India in 1946. Now, In 1947, March 1947, Captain Lakshmi Sahgal marries one of the leaders of the Indian National Army, one of the commanders of Indian National Army, that is Colonel Prem Kumar Sahgal, who's from Lahore, who served under Netaji. They marry in Lahore and they move to Kanpur. And during the partition time, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Captain Sahgal offers her services to the refugees who are affected by the partition and who are coming into India. Now, I would like to share with you some lesser known women, important women in the regiment, Rani of Jhansi regiment. To begin with is this lady. Her name is Janaki Atti Naharpan. She's also known as Janaki Devar. She was the founder of the. She was 16 when she joined Indian National Army. She comes from a wealthy family in Malaysia, and she was leading the regiment in the Burma regiment, and she was the founder of the co-founder of the Malayan Indian Congress in 1946. And yeah, and there is another person who is very interesting. Many of us would not even know. Now here is a photograph of the lady in front is Janaki Devar, and just behind her with the glasses is a lady known as Neera Arya. Neera Arya's story is not known much at all. It is very interesting story because she was married to a officer in the British CID, and this man, when he realizes that his wife joined the Indian National Army, he tries to convince her to assassinate Netaji, and she is not for it. Finally, this man tries to assassinate Netaji and he misses by a whisker. Learning about this, Neera Arya killed her own husband. And for this, after the disbandment of the Indian National Army, she was arrested and transported to the cellular jail and tortured so much that her breasts were cut off during the torture. She lived on. She was released after the Indian independence. She lived till 1998 in Hyderabad, India, in Telangana, and she breathed her last. Another lady is again another Tamil lady. Now her name is Saraswati Rajamani, and hers is a very interesting story. The reason is she was a 16-year-old spy who worked for the Indian National Army. If you notice, she was a young girl whose father was a patriot himself, who comes from Trichy, a town in Tamil Nadu. Remember the Jambu Tiva proclamation, the same town. He comes from there. He left India because the British were pursuing him for his nationalistic activities. And he came and made his fortune in Burma, where he started to lease out gold mines, and they were a very affluent family. And hearing Netaji's speech in Rangoon, Saraswati Rajamani immediately removed her gold bangles, gold chain and earring and gave it over there and came home. Next day, Netaji visits her home and returns it to her father. A young girl, a 16-year-old girl, fiercely says that, see, though this is earned by my father, it was put for me. So naturally, it belongs to me. I cannot take it back. You have to have it. Netaji was so impressed with her that her actual name is Rajamani. Netaji was so impressed with her that saying, Lakshmi comes and goes, that is, money comes and goes, but wisdom is something you have. So I would like to name you as Saraswati. So she gets a name as Saraswati Raja. Saraswati is a name given to her by Netaji, and she was proud to call herself as Saraswati Rajamani. After that, she further persists that Netaji takes her into the Rani of Jhansi regiment. Seeing her age, Netaji was initially hesitant, but he could not say no to her. And the next day, he assigns her and 4 of her friends to be spies for the Indian National Army. Spying what? What were they spying on? These girls disguised themselves as boys and started to work as errand boys for in the British barracks in Burma and started to pass on information. And she even saved one of her colleagues when she was captured by the British. When they learned that she was a spy, she rescues her and she comes back. After the INA was disbanded, her family returns to India. They were owning gold mine. They did not have anything when they came back to India. She lived in a life of penury. And it was in 2005 that the former chief minister of Tamil Nadu, seeing her plight that she could not survive just with the pensioner, freedom fighters pension, she allotted a flat, an apartment for her in the Tamil Nadu Housing Board. And she also gave us some financial assistance for her medical requirements. And in 2018, she passed away. Another lady whom I'm proud to say was a senior colleague of me is Rama Satyendra Kandwala. Here you see three women. The woman in the center is Leelavati Mehta, who comes from a wealthy Mehta family in Rangoon again. She was a recruiter for the Rani of Jhansi regiment. And one of the first recruits who joined them were two of her daughters. The lady on the right is Rama Satyendra Kandwala, and the lady on the left is her sister, Neelam Kandwala. Now, she was 17, they were 17 and 16 respectively. And Leela, why I am very proud of her is because I had a chance. She is a senior colleague because she is one of India's oldest living guides. She was tourist guides. And since she had learned Japanese and she was not keen on a desk job, she became a tourist guide and she offered her services. And I had met her in 2018, and she a year after, she was awarded the best tour guide by the President of India in 2017, and she passed away in 2021 at the age of 94. Now here are a few photographs of the women of the Rani of Jhansi regiment. And also the Indian National Army had also come out with their own currency and their own stamps. Here are a couple of stamps. Azad Hind Fauj. The Indian National Army, the original name is Azad Hind Fauj. Now this is a flag of the leaping lion, the tiger. Stamp commemorating the Chand Bibi Corps, nursing corps of the Rani of Jhansi regiment. The impact of the Indian National Army was so much that the British had no choice but to think about giving independence, because just after the disbandment of the Indian National Army, they began the trial of the Indian National Army personnel in Red Fort. Here you could see the three important personnel who are tried, that is Shah Nawaz, Dhilan Singh, and Sahgal. Sahgal, who becomes the husband of, who marries Captain Lakshmi Sahgal. And on the right, you could see a photograph is Pandit Nehru with the Defense Council for the INA. The impact of the INA trials was so powerful across India that people started to gather en masse in public places defying the British orders. And the trial was so much that Gandhiji had to visit the defendants. And here you got a photograph interacting with the defendants. And just on the back corner, you got Sardar, who's listening attentively. And here is one of the members who's playing one of the songs composed by the Indian National Army for Gandhi. And very interesting is, they all were released without any punishment, but nevertheless, they were not taken into the Free Indian Army, right? And this is an interesting photo. This is what, 1 minute. Also coincidentally, during this trial, in 1946, between 18th and 25th of February 1946, there is something known as the Royal Indian Navy Mutiny, also known as the Naval Uprising, which is not much known at all. It happened across by the Indian Navy personnel, where even they had taken the docks of Bombay, they had taken the over the docks of Bombay. But unfortunately, the Indian National Congress or the Muslim League were not supportive. The reason is because India was on the verge of getting independence, and they assumed that this kind of a mutiny might backtrack their effort. And finally, the Sardar appealed to the mutineers, and they gave up the mutiny. And a minute, something wrong with my, yeah. Now, this is something which you call defiance. If you notice, this is the three defendants of the Indian National Army trial, that is Shah Nawaz, Dillon, and Prem Sahgal. They are saluting in the Indian National Army style. And you can see the Sepoy at the back. He's saluting at the British Army style, which is like this. The Indian National Army style is this, right? And as a defiance, during the Royal Indian Navy revolt, the Indian officers were saluting the British officers with their left hand. In the army, you're not supposed to salute in the left hand, which is considered as a major offense. And the impact was so much of the trials that in the year 1946, the Ganesh Chaturthi, one of the Ganesh Chaturthi images, which was in Mumbai, was dressed, Ganeshji was dressed as an Indian National Army cadet with a uniform and the flag. This was a very impact of the Indian National Army and its final trial in 1947 among the Indian public. Now, the final lady we would like to see is Gaidinliu Pamai. Gaidinliu Pamai comes from Nagaland. She belongs to a tribe known as Rengmai, who are a collection of 3 tribes. And she joined her cousin, who is Haipau Jadunang. He was actually a spiritual and a political activist who had a spiritual inclination from a very young age, and he revived ancestor worship of the Naga community, especially the Free tribe, the tribe he comes from. And what happens is, it was sometime in the 1920s onwards, he starts preaching his revival of Naga thing. And he saw the Christian missionaries, activities of Christian missionaries in conversions in Nagaland, or in before Nagaland, it was the Northeast area, the Northeast frontier area. Over there, he saw that as a sign of imperial dominance by the British. And finally, he was arrested in 1931 and hanged to death. It was after this that this is the region which is known as the Xailengrong. Xailengrong makes up of 3 Naga tribal communities. And this is a tri-junction between Nagaland, Assam, and Manipur. And these are the areas which is connected with this particular movement. And the movement they had, the spiritual movement, is known as the Hiraki movement. Hiraki movement is literally means as pure. Hiraka movement literally means pure, is a more of ancestor worship among the Naga community. And this movement was later led by Gaidinliu Pamai. Gaidinliu Pamai, she joined the movement in the age of 16. She led the movement, and here again, the movement began as a the political side of the movement began because the British started to tax the Naga people, because see, if you notice, the agriculture in Northeast in the hills is more of slash and burn, where a portion of the forest is slashed and burnt and cultivated for a period of 5 to 10 years, and then they move on to another portion of the forest. So by the time they come to the first portion, it becomes a virgin forest again. Now, this was something the British did not let them do. Second thing, the British even were so they stooped so low where they did not allow the Naga people to even do fishing in their own rivers, which they have been doing for centuries before the British, right? And again, that's when Gaidinliu had urged the Naga people not to pay taxes to the British, because her logic is simple. You pay taxes to the British and they come to oppress us. Why should we pay for the foreigner? Let us unite with other Indians across. And also the British were very skeptical, because this movement had a major following So they started to hunt Rani Gaidinliu. And in October 1932, 1 year after her boy was hanged, she is captured along with her followers with the allegation she is given life imprisonment with allegations that she has been fostering against the British Empire and also killing the British sepoys of the Assam Rifles. She spends from 1933 to 1947, she spends about her life in 4 prisons across Northeast India. In 1937, Nehru meets her in Shillong prison and promises her freedom. And finally, in 1946, when the interim government of India is formed, under Nehru's instructions, she is released. And after that, she tries to revive the Hereka movement. But unfortunately, what happens is the 1960s, 70s becomes a turbulent time in the Northeast, where insurgency in Nagaland happens, led by the Naga Nationalist Council. Naga Nationalist Council was for secessionism against India. They wanted to separate Nagaland, which they wanted outside India, but Gaidinliu did not want that. She wanted to be part of India, but wanted a separate territory for the Zilagarong tribes. Zilagarong region is the Tri-Junction. The Tri-Junction, which this region, she wanted it as a separate state. Now, this is a demand which she kept it to Nehru. And later on, what happens is also another problem she faced was a Naga Baptist Council. The Naga Baptist Council were against her because they thought that she is, by the time she is released and she came out into public life by 1960s, literally all Naga people are converted to Christianity. So now they fear the Naga Baptist leaders and the Baptist Council feared that she might, how do you say it? She will, this Hereka movement could be something which could be a problem for them. So finally, she had to go underground in 1960 with her followers, and with the agreement with the government of India, she comes back to normal life. And because of her old age, she comes back to from the forest in 1966. She meets Lal Bahadur Shastri in Delhi, and again puts up a demand for a separate state for Zilarong tribes, which comprise of three Naga tribes. And later in the same year, 320 followers of hers also surrender to the Indian Army, and they are absorbed into the Nagaland National Force. And again, she goes to Delhi to meet the former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi sometime in the 1980s, 1989-90 or 98. This photo was taken during that time. And one of the last photographs of Gaidinliu Pamai is this. This is with her brother and her relatives. And in 1982, she was conferred Padma Bhushan. And sorry, I forgot this. Gaidinliu is also known as Rani Gaidinliu because it was Nehru who gave her the term Rani as Rani of the Hills. And to commemorate her, the Indian government had released a stamp in 1996, year after death. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you did learn about these 4 important freedom fighters in Indian history. Thank you all. Thank you to the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, for giving me this opportunity to share with you about the ladies, and also being coincidentally being on the Shahid Divas, the martyrdom day of Rani of Jhansi, on this day, July 18. Thank you all. Thank you for this opportunity. Please do feel free to ask your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saravanan. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have got goosebumps listening to your stories of all these Viranganas. I think you really transformed us back to the 18th century, 19th century, and you brought us till 2012. Very, very, very interesting. Hats off to these ladies, and such interesting stories you have told us about. It has already encouraged us and brought that interest in us to come and see these places which are connected with life of such Viranganas. I think it's amazing. We have never thought of this angle when we are, say, for example, if we are visiting Kolhapur or Belgaum, then we could think of adding this in our itinerary. A visit to Kittur Rani Chennamma's statue or the place where she lived.
The
It's
Kittur
very,
Fort.
very well.
Kittur Fort.
Yes, Kittur Fort.
Palace is there.
I think this is a new perspective that we have got now. Absolutely amazing. I think we do have a few raised hands and also a few questions. But before that, I would like to say something about the lady you mentioned who joined INA with Netaji Subhash, Mrs. Rama Khandwala.
Yes.
She has been a great guide, philosopher, friend to all of us since I have worked with her for many, many years in Mumbai. Hats off to that lady, and thank you for remembering her today. I'm sure your speech wouldn't have been complete without mentioning her. You have been, she has been your colleague and a fantastic lady. Till her last, she was a complete guide. She always helped people, spoke fluent Japanese, an amazing person, always encouraging people. So I think there have been people who have raised hands. One, Mr. Krishna. Would you like to say something, Mr. Krishna? L.R. Krishna. There was a raised hand by... and even Mr. Vishal Singh. Vishalji, if you can speak, I think you are you have unmuted yourself. Mautashi, would you like to say something?
Ma'am, as you said, it gives us goosebumps, and knowing about this great ladies, our, history, it's really makes sense. And today is such a beautiful day, and it's really remembering those ladies today that really, Mr. Hari has made our day.
Really?
The content is so
Absolutely.
full.
Absolutely.
It's bringing us to those days, how things happened, how
exactly
the country was formed, how the scenario changed, how the thought from that young age. It's everything all together. It was like so motivational, so inspiring.
Absolutely, absolutely. So much courage those ladies had. And we
Yes.
are now listening to their stories. And it now at this state, at this moment, it gives me a feeling that I must visit all the places connected with their life. It is so interesting, Mr. Sarvanan, you made it so interesting. Really, really grateful to you. I think the participants who have raised hands, if they can unmute their mic and speak, or else put your question in the chat box. In the meantime, Mr. Sarvanan, I would like to ask you a question. Since you are you have been traveling all around all four corners of our country, I'm sure even outside. But all the four ladies that we selected today for this have been from four corners of India, and each one no less than the other. Each one's contribution is amazing and very encouraging for us to listen to their stories. Are there any conducted tours or are there any packaged tours of these sites already happening in India?
There is one tour which they do for the Sepoy Mutiny, especially they do it in Delhi, Kanpur. This I remember because there was a group of British nationals whom I had done a research for them, and we had done it. And that time I learned that there was somebody in Delhi who was doing that. This was way back in 2009. So they were doing with the places connected with the Sepoy Mutiny. But as such, to my knowledge, there is not much. But I believe that the government of India presently with this Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav, they are planning something. That's what I believe so.
I'm sure. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, and there is a possibility we can do it. See, the challenge in this is, yeah, we can bring in this about freedom fighters, various places, because many of the places have been places where they lived have become memorials. Now, this is something we have to bring it into our school syllabus.
Correct.
It's like making history. You see, everybody in a history class will be sleeping, right? Because the way it is presented is, it's however good the teacher is, it becomes boring at a point of time, right? So that time it is better to take the children to the place and do it. And that's an inspiration for them.
Correct. Absolutely.
And for the general audience, what we can do is we can bring in these aspects along with the mainstream itineraries.
That's what exactly I said. If I'm visiting Kolhapur, I would certainly add Kittur Palace in my itinerary next time when I visit. So these webinars are definitely going to help people know more and understand more. And the places that you mentioned, for example, Madurai. If I'm going to Madurai next, I will definitely go and add those places of importance around Madurai area. The temples of Murdu brothers and the temples that they built. Kaira Koil, Kair Koil. Kalyar Koil. Yeah, so I'm sure we will think of adding these places in our itinerary, and I hope our people who are listening, our students, our friends, our participants who are listening to these webinars should make a note in their diary for their next bucket list and add these places in their tourist itineraries. I'm sure this will be a great tribute to all those who fought for India's independence. There are 3 participants who are raising hands, but are they able to speak?
Sorry. Yeah. Traveling in India, I've noticed one thing. You need to have at least minimum 3 berths in this country to really do every nook and corner, because every nook and corner is interesting.
Absolutely.
Tourists ask me, Hari, you take us to so many temples in 3 states. Okay, which one is your personal favorite? I tell them that that's a very difficult thing. A personal favorite means 2 things happen. One, I might neglect something else which is also beautiful, right? And also, firstly, it's very difficult to pinpoint that this is my personal favorite. That's the biggest difficulty I've seen. Let it be food, let it be an experience in India, let it be the landscape, let it be art. You cannot say that this is better than the other one. True. Everything has got its own uniqueness.
True,
so
true.
Firstly, you make a bucket list for India, prepare for 2 next rebirths, come back again, finish it, and then go to another country.
Not even 2 lives. I think we'll need 7 lives to come back to this country again and again to see this country. It's amazing. It's incredible. No doubt about it. Dr. Singh, you want to add something to this?
It was explained very well, everything by Hariji. Hariji is one of the best speakers. If you go through all the webinar, so we love him. We love him. He is the assets of the Tourist Guide Federation of India.
Thank you.
So everything explained by him, and especially this topic was chosen by Ministry of Tourism, and date was perfect.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Balidan.
What an honor. What an honor to be.
Lakshmi Bai.
Yes.
Always we read that one. Chamak उठी सन 57 में वो तलवार पुरानी थी, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी वो तो झांसी वाली
रानी थी सर।
तो उस डेट पे इतना सुंदर टॉपिक चूज करना ये बहुत बढ़िया एक देशभक्ति को दर्शाता है, और हम सब उस वीरांगना को प्रणाम करें जिन वीरांगनाओं ने इस देश की धरती के लिए, माटी के लिए अपने खून बहाए।
सही सर। I think this is our dedication to her today, and really we appreciate your giving us this input as well. Thank you so much, sir. I don't think, Ms. Mautushi, those 2 participants are able to speak, and neither have they put their queries in the chat.
They can't speak. Actually, they can only participate.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would have been difficult for us to.
So
they can email us. They can send us email.
They can send. That's what I was about to add, that they can still send their queries and mail them to the ministry. They will be answered by Mr. Sarvanan later. So for this, at the moment, it's already, we have passed our time. So thank you so much, Mr. Sarvanan. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ajay Singh. And we look forward to your participation again, our participants, our speakers, again in the next webinar, which will be the last webinar of Azadi Ki Amrit Kahani series. And we look forward to listening to more such stories. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. Thanks, the team MOT.
Thank you.